Here we go. You're back here on the Gill Connections podcast. Man, I'm just so glad again that you would hit play today to listen to these amazing men and women who choose to be track and field coaches. And today we've got the King Cardinal himself. Help me welcome from Illinois State University. He had to try. I don't know why we're not doing this in person now that I think about this. You're a
Yeah.
stone's throw away. Help me welcome the wise, the wonderful Mr. Jeff Bovee. Jeff, how are you, sir?
Hey, I'm great. Great to be here with you, Mike, and looking forward to having a nice chat. I'd have to say my AD would say, "Hey, we're not the Cardinals, we're the Redbirds."
Oh,
But I think you can see they look very similar with that mascot there behind me. But no, we're really excited to be here today.
that's just embarrassing on my part because, I called you the King Cardinal. I should have said the King Redbird because in our sales team, we have one, two, three, four individuals that are all Illinois State alums. Three of them were under you. We had another one who's coming here in July. He's not an Illinois State Redbird. He went to Carthage up in Wisconsin, and they are some form of Redbird as well. So I feel like that's just Illinois State adjacent
Yeah.
there. So I should have had that right. Shame on me for calling you Cardinals there. Of course, you're the Redbirds. And again, because you're King Redbird, I should have actually had you come over, and we could have had a Redbird reunion while we did the podcast. So you might
No,
be the closest person to me that is still remote for the interview. I'm just thinking about that now.
yeah, no, you've got a great crew over there for sure. A lot of former greats, All-Americans, and you got a wonderful group of guys, and excited to see them staying in the sport. Like
Yeah.
that's just one thing that I'm really proud about is people that choose to stay in the sport and to teach young people and to spread the love around in the world that we all work in.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Our sport, while it's the number one thing for us and you and, guys have made careers out of this, but in the real scope of things, sport and track and field is this big in our lives. We have all these other things, right? So when I see a program or a coach who has a lineage, whether they have a lot of athletes that went into coaching or a lot of athletes that went into coaching or stayed in the industry, like stayed in the sport, like, we got our guys here with Tim and Peyton and well, he's brand new, Max. I should probably know his name, but he's only been here weeks and I've been gone that week. So I get all excuses there. I think that says a lot about leadership. So I do that really. I have a lot of respect for when I see that coaching family tree, whether it's in coaching or in the industry here. So I'm excited to learn more about that leadership and how you got into it and what are you doing? What are you doing at Redbird? Because you've been there a long time, and I love that. So I'm excited to dive into that as well.
Yeah. All
How,
right.
how long have you been at Illinois State now?
I think I'm going on year 20. So I
20.
got here in '06.
That's interesting. So we're gonna
Yeah.
go in order. So I'm a little bit out of order right now. You started in '06. I started at Gill in '06.
I think I recall that.
Yeah.
You were at Troy before that?
Yeah, you can be mistaken to not know my history. Troy, several years ago, I came here from Las Vegas. So I was at Mississippi State. I quit coaching, went to Vegas and played poker for a year, and then came back to the real world and landed here in Champaign, Illinois. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's cool. Well, let's
Yeah.
learn how you got to here in Bloomington to the Redbirds. Let's get in our Wayback Machine here, Jeff. Somewhere track and field had to start for. Well, I'm assuming you were an athlete, and that's not a great assumption because we've had many great coaches who were not athletes. But
hmm
you to start where it starts for you. Where does track and field, the sport, where does that start for you?
Yeah. So the interesting story there is I kind of fell into it. My middle school, junior high, we didn't have cross country or track. I grew up in Glendale, Arizona.
Oh, really?
And yeah, so I grew up in Arizona and we had a lot of sports at the school, but we did not have track or cross country. We had a thing called a field day.
Mm.
And so it was like a 1 day track meet with all the elementary schools, and they'd have the softball throw and
Hmm.
standing long jump. And the marathon was like a 3/4 mile run. They called it the marathon. And so I would do all the events. I do the 60, the softball throw, the long jump, and the marathon. And so I just liked all of them. I'm like, let me just do this and do that. And then sometime, I think right after eighth grade, I did summer TAC is what they called it back then, USA track,
Oh,
USA.
yeah.
So I did that. I was on the Arizona Puma Track Club. We had a pretty good. club team there, and I started having some success. And
Were you doing any other sports though? Were you playing soccer or basketball or anything?
yeah, I was
Okay.
I was playing soccer. I played baseball for 9 years. I did
Oh wow.
football. Football was my first love, but I was pretty small. So
Yeah.
my eventual high school track coach came to me in summer gym right before freshman year. He's like, "Hey, I hear you're pretty fast. You should come out and run cross country." And I said, "Well, what's that?" He's like,
Oh,
"You've
because you
never
had
heard of
no
cross
clue.
country?" I had no
Yeah.
idea. I
Right.
had no idea. The longest run I'd ever done was maybe 2 miles up to that point.
Right.
And he's like, "Well, why don't you come out and run with some of the guys? We're going for a run." And well, it's July in Arizona, so it's 110 degrees
Oh
that day,
yeah.
and it was middle of the afternoon. And I'm like, "Well, I've never met you before, and I've never met these guys, but let me call my mom and see if I can go." And so I called her up with the school phone. She's like, "Yeah, yeah, sure, no problem." And so I jump in this van and we drive to the local desert mountain that was close by, and we go
This
for a run.
this is the start of a movie where a kid gets we don't see that kid anymore. I got in a van, we went to the desert, 110, and you
Yeah.
survived, thank God.
So I ran with a couple guys, and we got done, and the coach was waiting for us down at the end, and he's like, "Hey, you got to run cross country." He's like, "You just ran with the best two guys in the high school." I'm like, "Well, I know they were trying to drop me, and I wasn't too happy about that." So I had, so it got a little competitive, and it was like a 4 mile run. I had never gone more than 2 miles
Oh
before that day.
wow.
And he's like, "Yeah, you can't play football. You've got some potential in this sport."
Did you just feel like crap after that 4 miles though? I'm thinking like the longest you've ever run by double, 110 degrees. These dudes were you don't want to get shown up by the new stranger kid. Who's this kid? We're the
Yeah.
cross country runners here. I mean, I just feel like you had to be like dehydrated, sweating, like what am I doing here, guys?
I was just mostly just mad. These guys are trying to drop me. So I think my competitive juices
Uh-huh.
kind of kicked in.
Yeah, because I could see, if I put 100 kids in that scenario, I think 99 of them would be like, "Yeah, I'm going to play football. This sucks." But that competitiveness in you was like, yeah, guys, I'm just mad at you. What the heck, man?"
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
No, but they ended up becoming, good friends. And my high school coach, Brian Bogan, he had a ton of success coaching at my high school and a couple others after I finished up, and just a huge mentor for me. He was an Arizona alum, University of Arizona.
Oh
He was a
yeah.
pole vaulter. He was a field event guy, but he had a tremendous understanding of biomechanics and strength and conditioning. And he coached all the different events on the team. I'd say distance running, he probably knew the least amount about, but yet still very, very lethal in his understanding of that,
Hmm.
and how much he would learn and soak up. But he really gave me and some of the other guys on the team a lot of input into the things that we are doing as we went through the years of high school. And so I think that's where I really developed my love and passion for the sport, was just being able to have that that kind of relationship with my coach, and to get so much back from the sport, and the travel and going to different states, whether it be
Yeah.
summer track or the high school season. And a lot of my close friends obviously came from the sport, and still do to this day. So yeah, that's kind of where it all started for me.
What kind of track athlete were you? And what I mean by that is, were you the kind of guys you always had a very influential coach that talked about biomechanics, like he knew a lot of things, not just go run circles, go throw that ball far, he knew some things here. Were you the kind of kid, staying in high school here with me, were you the kind of kid that asked a lot of questions, and not like a cute, there's different ways of asking questions, but
Mhm.
like curiosity of like, hey, so why did we do that yesterday and now we're doing this, or and this is kind of my experience, and I could be just off base here. Were you the type of athlete that was just like, all right, almost like what do they say in football, see ball, hit ball, where it's like, oh, run, okay, run, go do 2 miles, okay, do 2 miles, do quarter repeats, okay, do like no questions, just
Yeah.
what do you want me to do, and I'm gonna drop the hammer and get it done.
I think early on, when I was a beginner in the sport and didn't know anything about distance training, I just inherently trusted him and what we did. And he said, "Go do this," and I would just do everything 100%. I didn't understand, percentages and efforts and this is supposed to feel like and what that's supposed to feel like, I just went, right? Like
Mhm.
I had a switch and it was always on, which was not always a good thing.
Oh,
Um,
so you're the kid that was going too fast on recovery runs and stuff? Is that what
yeah,
you're telling me?
yeah,
Yeah,
that
I
was me,
knew it.
right? And so I had to learn the hard way. And, I think as I got into, say, junior, senior of high school, that's when I started to ask a lot of questions or go to him and say, hey, because I know my body and what works for me, I think, what do you think about potentially doing this in training over the next few weeks? And he was always open to that discussion. But I had to go through the training for a while before I even knew how I was supposed to feel and what I was supposed to do, you know?
Where did you learn that? So, first of all, I commend you. You had to have some advanced physical maturity, and what I mean by that is that's one of the hardest. I think one of the hardest things of coaching is to get an athlete, a kid, to understand their body, and whether it's a movement event like a pole vault or high jump, or just hey, we ain't doing 10 miles a day, boss. The body is depleted, right? That's super hard. But then also when you started like being comfortable and you've earned some trust and respect from coach as well of like, hey, coach, today instead of X, can I do Y because of this reason? Where did you learn? Like, are you reading, back in the day, Runner's World magazine, or there wasn't a lot of opportunities for us. We're about the same age. There wasn't a lot of opportunities for us to go learn coaching at that point in
Yeah.
time. Where did you learn that and pick that up?
Well, yeah, my coach was a huge father of sport. His dad was a coach in Los Angeles and had won the California State Championship a couple times.
Oh,
And he went to West Hollywood High School, and he was a student of sport. And so when I'd go to his house, he'd had all the track and field news out on his coffee room table.
nice.
And I would as soon as I saw that newest issue come out, I was reading it front to back from the minute I picked it up, and I would just every month, like, hey, when's
Yeah.
a new one coming in? And and so I would read that, but then yeah, he started recommending books, and
Mm,
I started reading some training theory books. I started reading just biographies, whether it be the Jim Ryan book In
really?
Search of Gold or whatever it might be. I was just wanting. I mean, I wish that we had the access of the internet that we have today. I would have been soaking all that up at a much
Dude.
younger age, nonetheless.
Yeah.
But then you also start to meet coaches from other high school teams, or, I started then be getting recruited by college coaches, and you start talking about training and what are other people doing? What I was doing club track in the summer and asking what, the
Right.
runners from other schools did, et cetera. And so, information was getting passed around,
Yeah.
maybe not as easily as it is today, but certainly finding our ways to do that.
You mentioned you played 9 years of baseball and football and things like that. Did you do any other sports in high school, or did you just focus on cross country and track and field?
Yeah, I wanted to do football in the worst
Hmm.
way. I love football, but
Yeah.
again, decided to go out for cross country.
Yeah.
So I ended up, yeah, just focused on that. But
Wow.
I was big time into physical education, ended up becoming a physical education major in college. And so I took all kinds of different, courses, activity courses and that thing.
Yeah, I was getting at because you went very full bore into reading books, some of the Jim Ryan story and things like that. I was wondering if there were other like, are you also reading the Walter Payton story or things like that? But it sounds like you're getting as the ninth grade goes into senior year, you're getting very focused on track and field.
Yeah, I mean, I still had a passion for, sport, whether it be, college basketball or whatever it might be on TV, football and whatnot. I was a sport fanatic. I
Hmm.
collected baseball cards.
Yeah.
I was an avid baseball card collector for many, many years,
Yeah.
and was really into that still into high school. But yeah, I definitely say I did hone in
Yeah.
rather quickly on a lot of that, and I'd have to say credit to my high school coach, who he just, and it wasn't just me. I mean, there were so many others that he drew into the sport, and he could recruit well on the school campus, getting great athletes to come out from other sports, and he had a great got a fly flying around here.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, he just had a great reward system some kids that weren't as intrinsically motivated were more extrinsically motivated. He would give a hat out for your first PR and then a pin to put on the hat for your second PR. If you broke a
Oh,
class record, he'd buy you a coat. If you set a school record, he would just kind of up the bar on different gifts that he would
huh,
use with his own salary that he made from his position. And he just, next thing you know, everybody's walking around campus with all these cool hats and shirts and coats
man.
and different things that the coach would basically pay for out of his own pocket.
I see that a lot today with, dog tags and patches and stickers and things. And those are so cool. I love that. This guy, I don't know. I don't know that I heard. I feel like that's more of a recent-ish. And, recent could be 10 years, but that feels like a more recent thing. This guy was kind of there's no timeline on this, but I'm gonna say an early pioneer. Like he understood kids and it sounds like he understood the recruiting aspect too. Because when you said those kids were walking around the hallways, other kids are like, Wait a minute.
Yeah,
Tommy's got that. How do
yeah,
I get that? That's
right. And it was
super smart.
so you get the swag, right? And you're like, oh, that's cool. But then if you had more things with the swag, like other pins or whatever, he started to have like top 10 pins and school record pins. And, every year it was like, oh, we got this new thing we're going to implement here. And so quickly, he had so many athletes go on,
That's
Division
cool.
One athletes, junior college, was a big scene in Arizona. But yeah, he developed a lot of great athletes, not just at Glendale Cactus, but at Towson High School and elsewhere. So yeah.
That's so cool. You obviously had a great relationship with Coach, and he obviously was very creative and inventive. Can you think of a story like there's usually in those kind of relationships some kind of like funny, like oh, I remember when Coach did X, or we did this to Coach. Can you think of like a funny story that like just years later it's still kind of top of mind to you?
Well, the thing that was different about Coach Bogan, he just loved being around people and having fun and making things an adventure. And so he grew up in California, as I mentioned, and so every year he would take us out to California. One year we went to Magic Mountain. One year we went to the beach, and his parents lived pretty close to the beach, so we would stay at their house and go to the beach. And then another thing that we did on an annual basis is we would go and stay in Flagstaff and stay for a week in the
Wow,
dorms. And then we would hike the Grand Canyon. That was like our end of the week thing. Is we would drive up at like 5 in the morning, and he'd find a different trail. We would hike down, stay down there, and jump in the water or whatever for a while. And then we would run slash walk back up and get back up there before it got dark at night. So it was a long day, but
dude.
it was an annual thing that we did every year. Yeah,
It sounds like you had a blast in high school. I mean, seriously, these are way cool things, man.
yeah, yeah. It was so much fun.
You mentioned you grew up in Arizona. When someone finds out that I grew up in Alabama, they always ask me, "Oh, Alabama or Auburn?" I tell them I went to the greatest school in the world, Troy University. What did you grow up? Did you grow up in Arizona, Arizona State?
Arizona, University of Arizona in
You're a
Tucson.
Wildcat. All
I'm a
right, good.
Wildcat.
That's a
Yep.
cool campus. I like that school. All right, senior year, you start looking at the next level, meaning college, and whether you're recruited or not. And you already kind of told us you were recruited. Talk to us about kind of a three-part question. So, what was that process like for you? What did you go in as a major? Uh, what were you thinking of? And these two questions are kind of tied together. What did you start your major in at, and what did you think you wanted to become? Whether it was a astronaut, doctor, lawyer, all the things that we think we want to be. And at this point, senior year, is coaching anywhere in your mind at this point?
Coaching was not at the forefront of
Yep.
my mind
Hmm.
at that point. I was looking at business, in particular accounting.
Hmm.
I'm not really sure exactly why I was thinking about that because nobody in my family
Yeah, I was going
was.
to ask. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
was
No, not at all,
my
huh?
dad, I guess my dad was a small business owner I was born in upstate New York and we moved to Arizona when I was 10. Yeah.
Dude.
Um, we had family out in Arizona, so we moved there. But yeah, my dad was a small business owner, and so maybe from that aspect, it
Hmm.
had me thinking about business, and I really had no idea where that might lead to.
Hmm.
So, but honestly, I declared undeclared. Honestly, I was thinking business, but wasn't 100% sure, so I just kind of went in and just said, "Hey, I'll just take gen eds for a year or two and figure it out."
Because you mentioned like physical ed too, like so that's
Hmm.
somewhere in there too, and you're like, well, those two aren't really compatible. There's no
Well,
PE business degree.
there's not, and I was thinking teaching, but I had some people discouraging me from that. I don't know because of maybe financially it wasn't as lucrative or whatever. I don't know what exactly the holdup was
Boy, you showed
initially.
them.
So I eventually, by sophomore year of college, I realized that education was the route that I had the passion for,
Okay.
and it was somewhere freshman sophomore year with Dave Murray. Dave Murray was the head coach at University of Arizona,
Yeah. Oh,
and
so
I
so
would
you so
go
you
visit Dave often in his office, and I said, that'd be a pretty cool job to have that job that Dave's got there.
so I asked you if you were a Wildcat or a Sun Devil. You went to the University of Arizona.
Hmm.
Of course, you're a Wildcat. And Dave Murray, legend by the way, was your coach. That's so cool. Yeah, that's what always is so interesting to me is when the like idea of like, wait a minute, you've had it in front of you. You had your high school coach in front of you the whole time. You had Dave Murray in front of you, and then one day, like you said, you're sitting in the office and like, wait a minute, this is a job. Like, wait a minute, maybe I could do this. Like, that's always interesting to me. Like, the thing has been in front of your face the whole time, and eventually you kind of, for lack of a better term, wake up and be like, I could do this instead of it being done to me. I could do this. I could be a coach. That's cool.
Yeah, it certainly started there. And so then I went down into the physical education major with the coaching minor and actually did a biology minor as well, which ended up working out well for me later on. As my first full-time teaching position, but back close to my hometown was in biology and general science. And so that's how I got my foot in the door with my first full-time teaching job.
So you ran your whole time at Arizona?
Yep, all 5 years. Yep.
Dude, so how do you, I mean, I can't think of much worse places to be a distance runner specifically than Arizona. Like you mentioned, your first introduction to this was 110 degrees, 4 miles, getting just hammered by the teammates. How do you, and okay, and I back up and say, and lots of amazing distance runners have come out of that situation as well. How do you like? It feels like you have to be extra vigilant about your training, your maybe your diet, obviously your hydration. How do you just navigate that as you think about high school and college and like some of those hottest temperatures? How did you navigate that without just dying of a heat stroke?
Well, I mean, you definitely need to have water, and stops. Coach Murray would, if we were doing a loop course, he would stop every few miles and make sure we could stop and get water. If we had an afternoon practice, for example, sometimes we would just go early in the morning.
Mm.
On those warmer days, we'd go at 5, 6 a.m. And so that would certainly make it a lot easier. But then you got to think about, you're talking about the hottest months of the year, but during, October through March, you can't find a better place to be
Oh, that's a good point.
as you're training. I mean, it's
Yeah.
fantastic. You can be outside training all year round. So, in one sense, yeah, you have an extreme heat, but then the other half of the year, you're in the most wonderful place you can possibly be.
Yeah, I'm thinking the extreme. You're right. I've been there during the extremes. That's what I'm thinking. It's like, dude, how would you go run 8, 9, 10 mile? How would you do I would just pass out. And also it's me too. So of course I
Yeah.
would pass out. Yeah. That's
We'd
right.
also, during the, later spring track season, we get in April and May and June, we would practice under the lights sometimes. We go at 8, 9, 10 o'clock,
That's kind
and
of cool.
that'd be a lot of fun.
I'll say that just seems kind of cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. What did you end up becoming in the distance side? Meaning, were you more of a miler, 3K guy, or steeple, 5'10"? Did you go all the way up to 10? What kind of, you probably distance runners tend to almost hit all of them. Maybe not the steeple all the time, but tend to like, you are a 5K guy who also runs a 10 or something like that. What was your kind of niche?
Yeah, I was primarily 800, 1500
Oh, is that
in
right?
college. In high
Yeah.
school, I did some of the longer distance, but I was primarily 400, 800, and a little bit of the 16. I had the range
Oh,
in cross
wow.
country, but in high school, my coach Bogan really, we focused on the 4x400. Like that was the bread and butter of our team. And so everybody wanted to be on that team. We won the state title 3 years in a row.
Oh, cool.
And so I really wanted to be on that team, so I really focused on the 400, 800, and then in college, I had to move up because I wasn't going to be a top, NCAA athlete in the 400. So
Yeah.
the writing was on the wall there. So
But
uh,
you're a true mid distance guy then. If you even you said you moved up, you only moved up to the 815. You didn't go to
yeah,
the 10 for crying out loud.
yeah, I ran the 3K once outdoor, and I thought it was the longest race ever. But um, I did run cross country. We ran 10K quite
Yeah,
a
yeah,
bit.
yeah. Right, right. Oh
So and
yeah.
I was a top five guy probably my last 3 years.
Huh.
So I could do it, but once we flipped to track season, I couldn't wait to get on the spikes and run fast.
That's
Like
cool.
that's where I, really I would say had my most fun was when we could turn the gears over a little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah. That is always fun. I agree with that. That's cool. I love that. All right. So you go through 4 years at Arizona. You start out thinking kind of business and dad's a small business owner. Love that. I have so much respect for people who own their own businesses. It's amazing. So much chutzpah that you have to have for that. And then you see Coach Murray, a legend in our profession, and you start thinking like, wait a minute, maybe this is what I should be doing. So you said you changed your major to physical education, you get a minor in biology and coaching. Do you start, so those last couple of years as you're kind of like, okay, this is what I'm going to become. I'm going to become a teacher slash coach, something in that realm. Did you start, and you always had a way of looking at workouts and stuff from high school. But did you start looking even more into that? I imagine you probably, you still read and those kind of things. But now are you like peppering Coach Murray with questions of like, hey, did why next week should we do da 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 da? Or are you still kind of, Coach Murray's his own personality here. Sit back, even with that decision of becoming a coach and teacher.
I think again, going in, I mean, when I arrived to U of A, I mean, there was so many good distance runners at that time. I mean, we had Mark Davis, we had Matt Justo, Simon Gutierrez, uh, 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 man, you go down the line, Doug Heron,
It's been a
John
while.
Quaid, and like I was just soaking it up. I was so excited to be a part of that group and to just learn. And the seniors and the juniors on that team just kind of took me and the other young guys under their wing, and I was just talking to them all the time and asking them questions and I would say probably by sophomore junior years when I started going into coach
Hmm.
after I'd been working with them and then I felt like maybe I'd earned my stripes on the team by then that I
Hmm.
felt like I could develop that relationship with my coach and that was something that was really important to me because I had that with my high school coach. I really wanted that with Coach Murray. And so
Hmm.
the same thing I tell my athletes here at Illinois State, if you want a special relationship with your coach, you got to put the effort into that just as much as they've got to put the effort into that. And you can't always be waiting for your coach to come knocking on your door. Like if you want something, it's just like your goals and life and in the sport. Like if you want something, you gotta be doing you got to go for it. You got to raise the expectation of yourself and raise the expectation of your coach. Like you've got to challenge your coach to be a better coach for you
Yeah.
because you're a different person than anybody else that's been through that program. And so it's a reciprocal relationship. And I think I really started to learn that, as I started going through my years at Arizona and so, yeah, it's one of those things. And I really enjoyed later on as I got into my last couple years at Arizona, giving back to some of the younger guys coming through. But one thing that I really loved to do was host other recruits. And so when we'd have recruits come through the door, is to find out what they were doing with their coaches at their high school to help them become as good as they were
Right.
there. And you start to learn that there is no one way to do things. And just because we do it this way doesn't mean that you can't have success doing it some other way. And so how do you blend this new information with what you already know? And how do you make that work for either me at the time when I was training or as a coach now, just because they do X at whatever university and that seems to work for them, is that the right thing to do here at Illinois State based on
Right.
our topography, based on our facilities, or based on our weather conditions, or
Right.
whatever it might be. You got to figure out how do you make that work at your current. place that you're at.
It's interesting that you had a natural curiosity in regards to, you didn't use this word, but it is what it was, recruiting. Like, you hosted those kids and things like that. But then also with that natural curiosity, you had the ability when you were hosting kids and things like that, you're practicing for your future job. Like you didn't know it, but you were like you were learning things. I'm sure today you still use things you learned, whether it's a question, the way to ask the question, or make sure you show them the cafeteria or whatever. You kind of learn those things as an undergrad without even realizing that, hey, this is the future, Jeff. You're going to be doing this for a living, buddy.
And I couldn't wait to because we would host. Mike Maynard was the throws coach at the time, and Fred Harvey was our sprint coach, and Coach Murray, of course, a distance coach, and Bob Myers was a high jump coach. Anyway, we'd have these big recruiting weekends, and so we'd go to this big dinner at TGI Fridays, whatever. And we'd have 20 people there, and I just love that, because you'd have field event recruits, and you'd have the throwers, and you'd have the distance and the sprints,
Yeah.
and so and then we go to a basketball game, and get to be a part of a great, at the time, Pac-10, Pac-12 conference game. That was, it's hard to lose on a recruit when you take them to a game like that.
Yeah. What was what was fun for you about that? And what I mean by that is, at first I thought you liked, I'm gonna use the word peppering the distance recruits. Were like, hey, so what are you guys doing? Oh, okay, I see. Oh, wow, you guys are basically the same PR, but you do, to dumb it down, you're a high mileage guy and you're a low mileage guy. But you just mentioned, like, how cool it was to go and you had throwers and jumpers. Was it just like a curiosity of people and involved in our sport, or what was it?
Yeah, like, I mean, as you just go about that learning process, you start to realize there's a lot of connections between
Hmm.
different events, even though a thrower doesn't want to go out and run a mile, let alone 10. Nor does a distance runner want to go in the weight room and try to squat 500 pounds.
Right.
When you're talking about physiology and biomechanics and movement patterns and different things like that, and what it takes to be
Right.
successful, and the different intangible qualities, like, the motivation between great athletes is not different by
Right.
event area. There's always things that and so I was always curious what made somebody so good at what they do.
Yeah.
It wasn't just on our own team. I mean, I remember, lifting with a great baseball pitcher that ended up winning World Series games for the Minnesota Twins. And I would work out with him and just so curious, like, to get to know him and what motivated him. And,
Yeah.
and so my strength and conditioning coach was a phenomenal coach, and he was a triple jumper in college, very, very successful triple jumper. And just all the new things that he introduced me to with the plyometrics, I hadn't done a lot of that up to that point of my training age. And man, that made a huge difference in my trajectories when we started introducing some of these, basic forms of plyometrics, and maybe not as invasive as maybe some other event area athletes would do. But I was doing box jumps and I was doing some things, and I definitely saw the value in that. And so I've been able to, kind of figure out how to implement that into the distance runners. And again, it just depends on the distance runner, because not all of them are going to do a lot of plyos, but some do. And, especially the middle distance runners that we have here.
I think in an alternate universe, you're the host of a podcast like this, because that is a lot of the reason that I started this podcast. One, I wanted to uplift and honor coaches for what you do and the impact that you make, not only in our sport, but our young people in society. But two is I'm just so curious about people. When people ask me about my career as a professional poker player, I tell them that most of my game, because they always think, oh, you must be good at math. I am not good at math, trust me. Most of my game was sitting down at a table with 7 to 8 other people and finding out, where are you from? What do you do? Why are you here? How long you been here? The person, like why'd you get into that career? Those kind of things. I'm just fascinated. I've always, I'm a tangent person, Jeff. So this, we'll rein back
I'm
in
right
here
there with
somewhere.
you.
I thought, because I've always wanted to be an author as well. I thought what would be cool, and maybe it's only cool to me. I've thought, because I fly a lot. I was like, it would be kind of cool. What if just a random flight? Last night I flew home from Eugene, and so from Eugene to Dallas, I was like, what if I took a business card for everybody and said, "Hey, I want to write a book about this flight, American Airlines flight 1452, whatever the heck the airlines was." And the book is just the 100 to 125, whatever people in there, and just, what were they doing in Eugene? Why are they going to Dallas? And there's so many avenues around that. Now, there have been a lot of track people because we were all coming home from Nike Outdoor Nationals and things like that. But I just like, man, I look in a plane and I'm like, there's 120 super unique people and individuals, and I love that. But what I also love is that at its core, we have a lot of similarities as well. Like, we're not 120 super unique. Like, I know nothing about, I don't have anything to relate to you, Jeff, at all. That's not true at all. We all have a lot of connections. By the way, that's why we named the podcast the Connections Podcast. That I think is just fascinating. That just, that should be driving us together and not apart like we like to do right now in society. So yeah, I think you were supposed to be the host of this podcast. You were supposed to go interview and
No, but
learn
I
about other
think you make
people.
a valid point, though. I mean, you know, it seems the most successful coaches are the ones that are the most curious, and
Curious.
yeah, just I mean, I don't want to drop names, but there's a coach that's very successful here in the Midwest, and he's been coaching for almost 30 years. He probably knows more than me and 100,000 other people, right? But he is also the very one person that is still going around asking all the questions about what this coach is. And it's not just coaches in any one event area.
Right.
And I just find that so interesting. And it's like, of course, he's like one of the
Yep.
greatest coaches because he's always trying to
Yep.
learn more.
Curiosity is a superpower. I don't know why it took me this long in my life. I wish I'd have known that as a high schooler, but curiosity is a superpower. You don't like to drop names. Well, I do. I almost called it the Gill Shout Out podcast, by the way. One of the most impressive things in the world, two people that I look up to a lot, and one of them is, dear to me, like my mentor, Bouchek Snyder, and oh my gosh, Vince Anderson. I'm getting old, Jeff. The names don't come as quick as they used to. And Vince Anderson. We were all at the TTFCA, the Texas Track and Field Coaches Association clinic a few years ago. It's probably maybe it's pre-COVID, so 6, 7 years ago. And they're both speaking and whatnot. And Vince goes to speak, and I went in to pop in just to see, like, oh, how many people they all should be listening to this guy. Like, how many people actually showed up and all that kind of stuff. And I opened the door to look into the room, and 10 rows back, there's Boo Schexnader. Now, not just Boo listening and paying attention, writing notes, like had his notebook out. And I was like, first of all, these guys have been friends forever. They have to, they talk shop all the time. They know what the other person knows. Second of all, that dude, he doesn't need to be in here. And what's he doing? He is in there taking notes. I remember snapping a picture and putting it on Twitter. I was like, you want to be one of the greatest coaches in the world? Emulate this guy right here. He ain't too good to be listening to Vince or anybody else that's on that stage. That is so impressive. I hope I have that, that I keep that curiosity for the rest of my life. The rest of my life. I really do. Okay, let's get out of college. There's a reason why this is, average length is an hour and 45, and it's typically me and my tangents in my mouth here, Jeff. So, just smack me in the head and get me back on track here. All right, we are senior year. We graduate. So we know we're going to become a coach, a teacher. That's what we changed our major to. What's our first step?
Yeah, so my first step was I moved back to my hometown in Glendale and I started teaching at a school in the same school district that I went to
Oh, cool.
and coaching. And again, my first job was teaching science and biology. And I was there for 2 years.
Now
Um,
you didn't coach at your same high school.
no,
Okay, so I'm always curious about athletes that come back and coach under their former coach. You didn't have that.
no. By then, my coach had moved out of the district to a different school.
Okay,
And I did coach with him for 1 year while I taught in the school district that I went to, but then I was able to get a coaching position back in the same school district that I was teaching in. Kind of long story short,
got it.
I was basically there for a couple years
Yeah.
before I then got into college coaching.
So you're teaching, you're coaching. The number one question when I used to teach USATF level ones, the number one question I get from every high school coach was, "How do I coach college?" I was just out in Oregon for Nike Outdoor Nationals, and two different guys in two different situations ask me that exact same question. And typically I'll tell them, I was like, why? This is what I told them in Eugene. I was like, why? Why do you want to? Especially today in 2025, why? You're making a teacher salary, which could be better. I agree, and it should be better. But typically pretty nice, and it's typically more than what our college coaches are making. You have the fall off if you're not a distance coach. You're not going around the country recruiting. Like, being a high school teacher, coach, not a bad gig. What was it about the college side that had an allure for you?
Yeah, I think it comes back to those moments when I was sitting in Coach Murray's office, and I really wanted to take on that challenge and see what I could do with an opportunity to coach collegiately. And being in Arizona, there was only at the time three universities that even had a track and field, and they were all Division One. It was Arizona, Arizona State, and Northern Arizona. There's a lot of junior colleges, but there's limited opportunities basically. And so when another one of my big mentors, Tom Akers, Tom was somebody who was one of my professors at Arizona, University of Arizona. And so when he became the head coach at Eastern Illinois, he said, "Hey, you've always been talking about wanting to be a college coach. Here's your chance." So I was his first graduate assistant coach at EIU.
Dude, that's crazy. Because when
Hmm.
you said Tom Akers, you actually made me question myself a little bit. I was like, wait a minute. I know Tom Akers as the Eastern Illinois head coach, but we're talking about Arizona.
Hmm.
He was one of your professors.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I mean, just the luck of it all, honestly. That
Yeah.
he has to be a professor of yours. He has to get out here to become the head coach of Eastern Illinois, which he was the head coach there for a long time. He was the first, when I first got into coaching, I coached high school up in Chicago, and the first kid that I had that was recruitable, of that quality for Division One, Tom was the first guy that reached out to recruit my kid. So Tom has always had a place in my heart of like, wow, like it's like I have a kid that could go to college. Like that's pretty cool. And Tom was the man. Man, I love
Yeah.
that. That's so cool. So I love that you did start out in high school because I love to bust the myth that high school coaches cannot coach college. I just, every high school coach we've had here on this podcast, they do a lot of the same things that you're doing as a college coach. They're recruiting the hallways. They worry about, you know, how do you motivate kids? I mean, it's just, I just don't like that myth. And it's amazing to me how many great coaches, yours including now, we're learning that started out on the high school side. So I love that. That's your origin story, if you will. That's
Yeah.
pretty cool. So you go to Eastern. So you're from Arizona, Glendale, which I've been to, great place. Tucson, love Tucson. I'm a big Fred Harvey fan, so I like to go out there a lot. And you go to Charleston, Illinois. No shade to my friends in Charleston. One of our teammates here on our basketball side was a thrower for EIU, and we've had lots of EIU alum that work here. But it's not Arizona. What did you think when you came here to the Midwest of the Midwest, brother?
Yeah, no, it was I mean, honestly,
Silence. He's
well, what's crazy about it, I really did come to love Eastern Illinois. Charleston was a big change, 100%. And it was a leap of faith because it was August. I quit my teaching job. I didn't have a place to live. I
Oh,
hadn't been accepted into the grad program quite yet, but I trusted Tom so much. He
sure.
just said, "Hey, we'll get it taken care of." And he was in the midst of moving himself and his family. So when I first got there, I reached out. John McInerney was the cross country coach. And I pulled into town. There was like one stoplight, which I found amazing that there was only one stoplight. Maybe there's a few more than that, but there weren't many.
Damn many.
And I drove through town in a matter of 5 minutes, and I went all the way through town, and I'm like, wow, I just got through
Where's the rest of it?
it. So I turned around and I stopped at the one gas station that I saw, and I had to call Coach Mack, and he's supposed to be putting me up for a couple nights because I had nowhere to stay. And so I get on the payphone. I lock my car. I'm standing right in front of it, but I lock it because I'm from a bigger city, and that's what you do. But I'm on the phone talking to Coach Mack, and a guy pulls up in a car that had no top on it. Car's running, radio's blasting, and he walks into the store. And I'm like on the phone. I said, "Hey, Coach Mack, you won't believe this."
This is
This guy
crazy.
just walked, and he like paused. It was like a 5 second pause. He's like, "Yeah, what's the problem?"
He was waiting for you to add the part that you wouldn't believe. He's like, what
Yeah,
do you
like where I grew up, that car would probably not be there by the time he
gone,
came
buddy?
out.
Yeah,
So anyway, that was my introduction to Charleston,
that's funny.
and no, but it was a great time there, and learned so much, and yeah, got my master's degree, and
Was that Tom's? Because you mentioned he was moving out. Was that Tom's first year? So were you with Tom the first year?
yeah,
Oh, wow. Wow, you really did take a leap of faith because this wasn't like Tom had been there for 5 years. So, it was like, oh, I trust him. He's been there. He knows the lay of the land, everything.
yeah.
He was learning Charleston just as much as you were, really.
Yes and no. He was the assistant coach there from, for many years, and so he had a gap.
Oh, I
Say
didn't know
he was
this.
8 years there, then left for about 5 years when I met him in Tucson, and then he came back. He was very
Oh,
familiar with the scene already.
okay. Did not know that. I was thinking this was
Mhm.
his first foray out there. Okay.
Mhm.
What did you learn the difference in your GA? That's even in small schools, which, GAs have typically have much more responsibilities than a quote unquote big school GA. It's all about staffing is what it really is. Um, but even as a GA, it's different than a full time. No matter how involved you were,
Mhm.
what did you learn as you're not that far out of college, right? So there's still a part of you that's a college kid in that sense,
Yeah.
but you did teach, so that's adulthood stuff and coach high school kids, and now you're GA in at Eastern Illinois. What was some of the more immediate, like, oh, this is different. Okay, I don't get to do this anymore, or I have to do this now. Were there any like immediate stark differences?
Yeah, I mean, obviously being from a power conference school to then a mid-major, it was the budget was much different. How far you traveled was different. Fewer coaching, staff members and that kind of thing. But even though there were some limitations, there were some things that were even vastly opportunistic in the sense of how much of a family it was, and how much the team could overcome some of the lack of resources in some other ways, and they were just so and very successful. I mean, Tom built a program. He won 40 or 50 conference championships and had so many All-Americans over the course of time. And, he created that environment, and it reminded me a lot of what my high school coach had done
Mm.
uh, as well. Very different styles, but yet same results in creating kind of that family feel. And, like the athletes just responded to so much to Coach Akers and wanted to perform not only for their teammates, but for him and for the pride of university. And, and they had some good facilities. The outdoor facility is very good. And, there's a lot of great competition in the Midwest. So even though they couldn't go very far, they had everything that they needed. And so I learned, how to do things with a little bit less. And I think,
Mm.
that was a valuable experience for me in my coaching journey to, have that high school coaching experience, then a mid-major coaching experience. And then the next step was a junior college coaching experience.
Well, before we get there, so a couple more questions there at Eastern because you mentioned Tom and just have to give Tom his flowers. I put Tom up there a lot with like a Dean Hayes, two different individuals, but boy, both stayed at universities for a long time, both had a lot of success. I remember when he called to talk about my hurdler. Um, when we talked about like how many conference how many team wins and things like that, and just being so like holy cow, because it's hard to win. Winning is hard, so when you win one conference championship, like that's a big deal, that's hard, and Tom did it over and over and over again. And don't be mistaken, even though some of those scores are just crazy of how big he won as well, those were hard. Everyone was hard. There was so much that went into it. So always loved and impressed with what Tom did and the staff that he always had and the kids. I mean, it's quite amazing. It was really, really impressive there, what Tom Akers did at Eastern Illinois. A GA should be, it's not mostly, but it should be an opportunity that after your year or 2 year of grad work, you then decide if you're going to go into coaching. I think the majority do go into coaching, but that should be like a tryout period. You obviously didn't decide to go on. No thoughts after the GA period of going back to coach high school and coach there at all, or was it always like, or did that like cement the yeah, okay, I'm plowing forward as a college track coach?
Coming right out, I'll be honest, like I applied for so many jobs and got nowhere,
Uh-huh.
in the process, to be honest. And I was looking for coaching, if it was a high school, if it was small college, if it was big university, I was open to any and all. I just wanted to work with young people and work, be in the sport. And so ended up having an opportunity. The one and only interview that I got was at Parkland Junior College.
Is that
And
right?
that's right. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So before we bridge to Parkland, and now for guys and gals that don't know Parkland, Parkland is right here. Literally, I was gonna say, is it faster for me to get to the Illinois campus or Parkland? Both of them are within like 8 minutes, so they're both super fast here. But you stayed here, and spoiler alert, we know you're in Bloomington, so that's basically a suburb of Champaign. That's probably really offensive to Bloomington people. Sorry, they're two very distinct towns. Blah blah blah. Um, how did you deal with the weather? I'm just thinking, I asked that question about like, how do you just even manage running and being an athlete in 110 degrees? I think it's 24/7. It's obviously not. But then you came here and I mean, was this like the first time you had like real snow, real cold?
Well, like I said, I was in upstate New York until I was 10.
Oh,
So
I
we
didn't know how
saw
old.
some
Okay,
real,
okay, yeah.
yeah, I was young,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but I saw some, bad winters. And so, yeah, the winters aren't amazingly fun,
I bet.
but again, flip it around, you get from March until October is great.
What a green endorsement. They're not great. You had to and maybe you got to instead of had to, you got to like change some of your training, meaning like you didn't have to worry about practicing at night under the lights and things
Right.
like that. More of the training day was available to you.
It was, except for during the colder winter months. And,
Hmm.
when I was at Parkland, I was coaching sprints and hurdles and jumps as well as
Oh,
the
I didn't know that.
distance runners. So that was an opportunity for me to, I guess, widen my scope of coaching into other events. And eventually I hired some assistant coaches, and some of that, I gave to them, and I was able to focus a little bit more on some of the jumps and the distance after a while. But I really enjoyed coaching the high jump in particular, as an area we had in a 5-year span. We had about five male high jumpers over 7 feet there at Parkland,
Dude.
and we had quite a few go on to Division I programs around the country, and so we started to develop a really good program. Unfortunately, after my last year, they decided to drop the program. So, but we really had a pretty good run there for a while.
One of my most satisfying jobs that I had coaching was coaching at the junior college level. It affected me deeply in a very positive way. When you were there, by the way, and one of the cooler mascots, by the way, the Cobras, I do really quite enjoy Parkland's mascot there. So you get the job there. Uh, Again, here's a stark difference. You're coming from high school coaching, and then you go into college coaching, a 4 year college coaching, and then you go junior college. Those are, all birds of the same feather, but different colors here. Recruiting's differently. You are also trying to get your kids recruited like you weren't. It's kind of an amalgamation actually of high school and 4 year together. I think that's part of what I like JUCO, to be honest with you. So it's so hard. You're always recruiting one aspect or the other. How did you? I want to say learn that. How did you adapt? I mean, obviously you did fairly well. You had a bunch of good high jumpers and other athletes as well. But how did you navigate that new space of coaching? You're getting a real education of all track and field coaching in these years.
Yeah, I would say, my learning, I see a lot of young coaches now, they might be at a university underneath a mentor for several years before they then go on and take on their coaching role. And I think that's a wonderful way to go about it. Mine was almost like I just kind of got thrown into it, and I had to learn from experience
Mm.
of trial and error, and of course, talking to people whenever I could. But I had a high school teaching job on the side. That was my side job
Is that
with my high
right?
school. The junior college was a part-time paid position, so I was basically working two full-time jobs because I was recruiting. I was, traveling with the teams on the weekends, but I was
Dude.
teaching 7:30 to 3:30 every day. So then I would coach and
Oh,
recruit until later at night. And I did that for about 5 years. So it was a great learning opportunity, but I really had to just kind of develop those relationships with a lot of the coaches in Illinois because I'd only been here for a year. When I was at EIU, it was a 1 year master's program.
right.
So I was learning so many developing new relationships to start that recruiting process. And so, yeah, I was just going to meets whenever I could and on
Dude.
the phone and email and all that.
What did you get that master's in?
Athletic administration.
Okay, got it. And you mentioned you hired assistant coaches to take over some of those responsibilities. So when you first got there, were you the only coach?
Yeah,
Or
for a few months, and then I was able to hire one. I had one assistant in the first year, and then I think I had two by the second year.
how? How? How do you being a teacher is extremely hard. So you're teaching from, 7 to 3. What was it high school?
Yeah,
What high school did you teach at out here?
Champaign Central.
You were essential. That's so cool.
Mhm.
Um, so that alone would be like you're busy, a full-time job. You're grading, you're teaching. I mean, that's that alone, just 7 to 3, full-time job. And then you hop just north a little bit, right? And you coach. That alone is a full-time job. And part of that full-time job there is you're always trying to recruit kids to your team and you're always trying to recruit kids off your team. You're trying to, like you mentioned, the relationships with other schools and stuff.
Yeah.
How in the world did you do, you are literally working almost 24/7. Like you got a few hours of sleep every once in a while, and that's about it.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, certainly, I just loved it. I wanted to help our, young men and women have opportunities when they got their degree to move on, and I was motivated to have success and to win. I wanted to win championships, and if you're going to spend your time doing something, I feel like you need to really throw yourself at it to do it as well as you possibly can. There's no halfway. There's no 90%. Like this
Okay,
is what we're doing.
stay there because I agree with that. To a degree, I agree with that. But you're not able to do that. You're not able to throw yourself 100% into teaching. You were not able to throw yourself 100%. There's only one Jeff. There's no splitting. There's
Yeah,
no
yeah,
cloning. So were there ever like frustration times? And like I'm trying to think of like, your one of your high jumpers really needs to talk to you at 11 in the morning, for
yeah,
whatever reason. It's JUCO. Well, it's just coaching, not even JUCO, just coaching. And you're in the middle of class, man. I'll call you in my free period if I can, and if not, I'll
right.
see you at 3:30 or whatnot. Were there like
Yeah.
frustrations?
Over time, eventually that's what it got to, right? And so I
Mm.
knew something had to shift. I couldn't do this indefinitely, and I was hoping to find a full-time opportunity there at the junior college, and it just didn't present itself. They didn't have full-time coaches there in general. So
Oh, wow.
it was time to make a shift at some point because of that very reason that I wanted to fully invest my time full time into coaching because I found myself spending more time even in my teaching hours thinking about a workout or
Right, right,
thinking
right.
about what recruit I needed to be following up with or whatever it
Exactly.
was. I'm like, I think it's probably fair to everybody involved here if I do this
Yeah.
full time.
And I like that really, I'm not hearing that there was necessarily any internal debate about this, but if you ever were debating, like, am I a teacher or am I a coach? It doesn't sound like you were at practice thinking about the second period grading plan. It was more like you were in second period thinking, okay, I need to do this workout, so your own attention span showed you like, you're supposed to be a coach, not necessarily a high school teacher. Yeah.
Yes.
How
Yes.
did you, before we move on to the next opportunity, how did you're a distance guy and you're a coach. I should say that first and foremost, but all your experience so far has been in the distance primarily.
Mhm.
How did you start coaching sprints and jumps and hurdles and by the way, successfully? Like I remember we recruited, you had two twins, Duraco and Dorico,
Mhm.
if I remember their names right.
Yeah.
Two hurdlers from I think O'Fallon, if I remember. I may be getting kids mixed up here, but we recruited
Danville.
Danville. There was a hurdler from O'Fallon. Maybe he didn't go to Parkland.
Ralph
Um,
Holmes.
Yes. Oh my God. Great memory. I recruited all those kids when I was at Troy. So, I mean, they were like, you had good kids. How did you, from this distance background, so what was the first step? It can be daunting to have a long jumper in front of you and you're like, all right, I got to figure this out. How did you figure out and educate yourself so you could educate the kids these other events?
Well, I think when you asked that, the first thought that came to mind was my high school coach, Coach Bogan, because he had to do that with so many different events that he didn't really know, and I saw him go through his process. And so you don't know what you don't know, and I think, talking to the student athletes is just being real with them about your background and say, hey, we're going to be learning some things together here. And then you just start talking to as many people as you possibly can to learn as much as you can. And and the old principle that I follow is less is more. And so
Mm,
like especially with a jumper
well, that's good.
or a sprinter, I mean, obviously it's a lot more complicated than that, but yet at the same time, if you want to get more out of somebody, you gotta, you know, not overtrain. You gotta have a healthy athlete. You need to focus on the most important things. And if you miss some smaller things, like, yeah, we're going to build on that. We're going to implement that a little bit more down the road because now I realize, like, hey, I can be doing these other things as well. But like, this is what I do know that we need to be doing. And we're going to start with that and kind of build the pyramid from there.
Uh, we're going to talk specifically about coaching track and field, but in life in general, that quote you just said, that statement, less is more, is really invaluable. Like a lot of our young coaches could start their coaching education journey by that first, less is more, because we try to just pack and build everything in. And sometimes it's the bad ego part of us that does that because it's like, I want to show that I know it all and that I know enough for this athlete or my head coach. I want to show them that I know
Yep.
everything. And it's like, yeah, less is more. That's how you hurt kids. That's how you burn out, by the way, things like that. So I love that statement. So you just kind of attacked it. First of all, you had some background educationally wise in regards to biomechanics, biology, things like that. So you just kind of attacked it like, okay, I'm not going to be the greatest jumps coach in the world. It's not necessarily my passion, but I know enough to help this kid, and we're going to keep them healthy, and they're gonna be able to show up on the line when the
Yeah.
meet is ready.
Right. But then, we go to a meet, and I remember going to Western Illinois. It was an early spring outdoor meet, and I had two guys high jumping 7 feet, and Larry Wazorek was there with Iowa, and,
Hmm.
and Coach Wiz was coaching the high jump. And so here's two distance coaches coaching the high jump, right?
That's funny. Yeah.
And so he had a couple really good jumpers, and so we got chatting one day. I'd never met him before that meet, and I was just asking him like, "Hey, what do you do? And what should I be doing? These are some things we've been doing. What am I missing?" And like you just start developing those relationships and realizing that, hey, there's so much more that you can do, but how do you like, because this is where we're at now, like we can't just all of a sudden start doing all these other things. Like, what are some smaller things that we could slowly start to implement into what we're already doing to be successful so that we stay healthy, we can get better, but you're not burning them down so much that they have no legs to go jump, right? And so it's just trying to find that fine balance.
How do you drop the ego and ask someone else? Like when you asked like Wiz there as an example, which that's fascinating because And I don't know if that made it easier or harder because it's like, oh, well, this is a distance guy too. Like we know the high jump is secondary on our list, not our primary. So maybe that made it easier, and but I could see some people saying, well, why would you even ask him? Why didn't you go ask the quote unquote real high jump coaches or whatever? But how do you drop the ego to ask for that help? Because once you start asking questions of like, hey, so what do you guys do? Everybody knows what you're doing. You're like, hey, I need some help here, right? You're kind of asking for help. How do you drop that ego and ask that help? Because some of us have, we build up this wall. Again, I want to be known as the number one guy. I want to be known as the guy who knows it all. So I can't be asking other people, especially a distance coach, about high jumping. Are you kidding me? How do you drop that ego so that you're learning so that you can do better for your athletes?
I just think you have to realize that there's somebody that's always better than you. I mean,
Mm.
I was at the NCAA meet, our preliminary round down in College Station a couple weeks ago, and I see Andy Powell walking around. I'm like, man, like I have 100 questions I want to ask that guy right now. So I think, you got to just put the ego aside and realize that there's somebody that's probably doing things in ways that could benefit you. And it's about how you ask the questions and it's about when, it's
Mm.
like the timing is kind of a critical time. Asking questions at the NCAA preliminary round may not be the best time, but maybe at a small meet in Macomb, Illinois, at the beginning of the spring is a little bit easier. I don't know. I think
Uh,
timing is everything, though, right? And
yeah.
sometimes you know somebody that knows somebody, and they introduce you, and you say, "Hey, I've got this athlete. Like, this is what we're doing. I feel like there's something missing. Like,
Mhm.
what do you think? What do you think I'm missing here?" And so sometimes those little like nuanced things really make the biggest difference in your coaching. It's the art. We all can like read and take all that, general training model and say, hey, this is our recipe, but it's like how do you change that recipe at the right time and make sure that you get the most out of that athlete?
That's where I see at high school state clinics and USTF CCCA, where some of the real meat happens. Amazing presentations, and you should be front and center and watching all those presentations. But the conversations that happen right outside those meeting rooms, almost like in the corners of the hallway, you see these groups of people, and it's like, well, I know they're not all distance coach. There's a jumps coach in there somewhere, and you start asking those questions. Hey, how did you do this? I saw your athlete, did so much better this year. How did that go? Hey, I've been dealing with this one kid. I can't get him to blah 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 blah. Those questions are those conversations. I think that's what I call. There's formal and informal coaches ed. That's the informal side, the peer to peer, and it's neither are more important than the other. They're both extremely important. So I love that. So you
Yeah.
didn't at College Station at the finals of or I guess the semi. I don't know. I give up on this regional meet. You didn't go during the finals or whatever it is of the 1500. You didn't go running over to Powell and ask him questions because he had like
No.
20 kids in that freaking thing or something like that.
Yeah,
Jesus
exactly.
Christ.
He was too busy, but
It's
no,
unbelievable.
he'd probably be the first person to
Yeah.
answer, talk to you. But
Yeah.
I've talked to him for sure in the
Yeah.
past. And,
I love that. I love that.
but yeah, I think most coaches are willing to share. I think it's all about
Yeah.
going about it at the right time.
And by the way, the ones that aren't, you might not want to really know what they say anyway, to be honest with you. The good news is that is measured in my experience is very, very small of someone who thinks they have secrets in this profession. So if they think they do have secrets, well, that you probably don't want to know them. Go find someone else like a Bouchek Knight or Andy Powell, etc. Okay, so you are literally burning the candles at both ends, man. I just can't imagine working full time as a teacher. That ain't working full time as a sales guy. You're grading pay. My wife is a long term sub, so I have gotten a much better picture of what full time teachers do, man. So again, that alone is a full time job, and then on top of that, coaching junior college track and field. You're looking for a more full time coaching job. You're in the second period thinking about the workouts for that afternoon. You're like, I'd like to be working on that workout
Yep.
at 9 in the morning, not teaching biology. What's the next step from Parkland Community College?
Yeah, so I kind of was after you said working 80, 90-hour weeks for quite a while. We had our first child. My
Yeah.
wife and I had our first child, and she had a thriving practice there in the Champaign-Urbana area, and so I actually stepped away from coaching and took an academic position at the U of I, was teaching, advising in the kinesiology department. So I
Really?
did that for 3 years, and somewhere along year two in that journey, I was sitting at my desk, and I remember this distinctly. I had a undergrad student in front of me, and they're trying to explore what career path they want to go down. And I said, you know, you got to follow your passions, you got to follow your dreams. I was giving this great speech, and they left the office, and I looked at, I stopped, and I thought, man, like I'm not even doing that. I'm not doing what it is that I love to be doing. And I enjoyed the position tremendously. I really did. I loved working there at the university. But I was not coaching, and I felt like
Uh-huh.
this huge void was there. And so, eventually that had me looking for an opportunity, and that's when I ended up teaching and coaching in Central College in Pella, Iowa, Division III.
Jeff, I feel like I know you, and now I feel like I don't know anything about you. I had no clue. Okay. Love that story of sitting in your office telling that kid that because I like to like when people are telling stories, I'm a visual guy, so I'm kind of playing the movie in my head, and I kind of took the kid out and put a mirror in there because I knew exactly where you're going when you were saying that. I was like, oh, you weren't talking to that kid, buddy, you were talking to yourself. Of like, wait a minute, what am I doing here? This is
Yep.
great and all, but this ain't my passion. This ain't what I was put on earth to do. So I love that. And I do have to give a small caveat or not caveat, but I want to explore just real quick because you mentioned it and it is important. So a year after you stepped away from Parkland and went to U of I as a teacher, uh, Parkland dropped the program after you, not while you were there, the year
Yep.
after.
As soon as I left, they dropped the program.
Right. Okay. And what a mistake. I just can't believe. Um, I mean, for an athletic program today that does well, like their volleyball team is always doing really well. Champaign-Urbana is a great area in the Midwest is a great area for track and field. I truly wish that they could bring it back and do it maybe differently. They don't necessarily have to have all the events and things like that, which I would love for them to have, but they could have a successful junior college program right here in Champaign at Parkland Community College. So I just hate that they dropped the program and wish that they would make the right decision and bring it back. So I just wanted to point that out. Okay, so you go to U of I, you're there for 3 years,
Hmm.
and then you go to Central and Pella. I
Hmm.
thought you were staying. I thought this was the leap to Illinois State. You go
No,
all the way out, all the way. It's a haul. It's a drive. So you go to Central, and that's Division III.
correct.
So
Yep.
at this point, and you're still young in your career here at this point. Let's be real here.
Yep.
You've got high school coaching under your belt. You've got 4-year Division I under your belt. You've got junior college under your belt, and now you learn Division III. That's quite an array of really same sport, different avenues of how it gets meted out. What'd
Very
you think?
different.
Yeah, what'd you think about Division III?
I loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Division III, so different than my experience as a student athlete. Central and Pella, beautiful town, wonderful people to work with. They're very successful even to this day. Joe Dunham's over there doing a fantastic job with that program. Kevin Sanger was the head track coach. I was the head cross country assistant track coach when I was there. And Kevin had a great thing going on the track side. We really started to develop the cross country program, and I was there for 3 years and
Wow.
absolutely loved it. And the drive and the passion that those young men and women had was amazing. We were able to squeeze out everything we possibly could, and they were doing it for all the right reasons. Like it wasn't because of scholarship money, it wasn't because of really any other reason than they just loved the sport.
Right.
And I could relate to that in so many ways. And it was nice in so many respects to not the scholarship part of things can be a challenge as a coach. It's not, it's nice to have it so you can recruit talent, but it can, get in the middle of some of those relationships at times, and it's not the fun part of why I do this for at least on my end of things. And it was nice at the Division III level that that was never a part of that, and you could just go and enjoy the sport together.
I like how you put that about the scholarships. And in my head, I was like, yeah, you're not buying athletes. And that's a very today 2025 statement with NIL and things like that.
Mhm.
However, when and a lot of us still are under this operation where we have, 10 scholarships that we've got to met out a whole team. Uh, it just kind of hit me when, when people talk about buying athletes today, because I don't like that statement because it's not true. Um, I don't know that we were doing it like I'm just thinking of my career when I coached and recruited and, I'd offer a kid 30% and really wanted them, but that's where I felt their value was. And they'd come back and say, well, Bovee at Illinois State offered me 50%. I'm like, well, I do need this high jumper for crying out loud. So now I've got to go 60%. Like that was buying an athlete. Let's be real here. Like it was that kid in that example didn't say, hey, Bovee offered me 50, but Mike, boy, I really like you and your school better, so I'm going to take 30. That happens. That and happened. But that's not the majority. The majority was you get into
Yeah.
this little freaking bidding war or whatever. So in D3, you don't have that because it's all financial need and need based. I've said this many times, here on the Gill Connections podcast, we work very hard at having people that represent all divisions. So high school, D1, D2, D3, NAI, JUCO, elite, summer club coaches, middle school, etc. And I'll always say it in regards to our college coaches, the D3 coaches that I have on here, they always seem just a little happier than all my other coaches. They just seem to have a bigger smile and just seem a little less stressed. And they're still, I mean, go look at D3 Nationals. They're still outputting some amazing friggin' athletes here. You still got to coach your butt off to win a title and win any All-American certificate in Division Three. And I do sometimes wonder, this would be, if you counted from when I started today, this would be like close to my 30th year, right at my 30th year coaching. And I always wonder, I wonder if I'd have figured it out by now. I wonder if I'd have figured it out at some point in my career. It's like, you know what? Just go D3, man. You get paid pretty well. You still
Yep.
get to coach kids. You start the fall a little bit later. There's these breaks in the middle. I'm like, man, I don't know, man. I think D3, maybe they're going to end up becoming like the biggest winners of all this change in NCAA. And they're already our biggest division as far as number of programs. They have more programs than Division Two or Division One. Maybe
Yeah.
Division Three, maybe the light gets shined on Division Three, and people realize like, man, this is the golden goose, and it's been here the whole time.
Yep.
So did you? Because you came from with a little hiatus in University of Illinois, you came from JUCO, which is very scholarship intensive. And what I mean by that is you're giving out scholarships and you are trying to help people get scholarships. So you're
Yep.
like it's a tug of war. You're always talking scholarship. To yeah, have you applied? Have you put your FAFSA in? Like that was more of your conversations, right, at D3?
Yeah. Right. And grassroots recruiting. I mean, it was,
Oh
and
yeah,
Kevin Sanger showed me the way on now, when you're junior college, you can recruit the best that's out there. Sometimes I got the grades, sometimes I don't have the grades, but you're trying to get the best. Division three, you're always trying to get the best there too, but you're also trying to get numbers. And so
right.
he showed me like just we basically I felt like I went to every single high school in the state
Yeah.
of Iowa over the course of 3 years. I had done a school visit,
Wow.
and it was just like there'd be weeks or we for 2 days we'd just be out on the road going from one school to the next and just, hey, anybody that wants to do the sport, let's do this. And yeah, it was way different, but I think again, it gave me a whole new perspective on
Mhm.
recruiting in like, the weekly letters and the so many smaller little details of recruiting I never would have learned had I not
Right.
had that opportunity. And but I still had to have a high standard as far as like my coaching and my expectations
Hmm.
and my student athletes. It's never changed, no matter what level I've coached at, high school, junior college, Division three, Division one. I do the things the way that I think that I need to be doing them and have the same expectations of what it takes to be a part of the program. And so we just kind of did that within a model that we could fit that into there at Central College.
I'm amazed at what coaches get done today? Like when you look at what's happening in track and field today in 2025, you mentioned we were together in College Station. I just look at the results of those events and it's crazy. I just got back from Nike Outdoor Nationals up in Eugene. I mean, just crazy. I mean, just crazy, like things we never thought someone of that age, whether it's a high school kid or a middle school kid. We had some middle school sprinters this weekend that were just, I mean, just ludicrous, to seniors, to professionals, etc. And yet, I think, when you look at it, all of it down kind of at its nature of what it is involved and things like that, maybe the best coaches we have are on D3. Those D3 kids, like you said, a lot of them, not maybe not most, and maybe not definitely not all, aren't getting recruited by D1 schools. But then you go look at the D3 national meet, and I bet you every single kid who's an All-American, and maybe for sure like the top three of Division three, a Division one school would take them in a heartbeat. Like those guys and gals in Division three are coaching their tail. You talk about real development in our sport. Holy cow! You better be a developer. There is no getting a made athlete. There's no getting made athlete in Division One either, by the way. I don't like that myth either. No kid is coming out of high school and they're immediately a national champ in the NCAA. So you're developing no matter what. But it's just that D3 level. Like I said, I just sometimes I wonder. It's like I wonder if I'd have figured it out by now. All right, Jeff. So you're enjoying D3. You're succeeding in D3. But maybe you have D1 or bust mentality. I don't know. What do we go after Central?
I think in my younger years, I thought, especially coming right out of college, I'm like, oh, I really want to be a Division One coach, et
Sure.
cetera, et cetera. But then
Mhm.
after those other experiences, high school, junior college, Division Three, I really got to the point where, I'm really happy. Like I could be at Central or Division Three the rest of my coaching career. I'm not looking for the next thing. And as soon as you start to kind of have that mentality, that's when somebody knocks on your door. And so Illinois
Yep.
State, reached out and
Yeah.
I definitely wanted to listen just because I had seen Illinois State for many years, being in the Illinois area at EIU and at Parkland, having sent athletes here to see what kind of facilities and education that it had and the opportunities to win here. So I definitely was going to listen,
Yeah.
and just the opportunity was presented to me, and I jumped at it. I really wanted to see what I could do at the Division One level.
Well, I want to spend these last few minutes talking about this because you mentioned at the top of the show that you've been there for 20 years, which, yeah, I remember a few years ago at USTFCA was with a group of coaches, and we were talking about coaches that had been in a program for a long amount of time. And, there were some real quick, obvious ones like a Mouse and Curtis Fry back then. But after we all kind of got out about 7, 8, 9, 10 coaches, it got real quiet. Like we had to really think about, well, what about so and so? Yeah, no, they've been there, I guess, 17. And what about so and so? No, just got there 3 years ago. Like it's a rarity. It's more rare that someone has been at an institution for 10 plus years, 20 years, and close on your year here, than it is the guys who've been there 3, 4, 5. And by the way, no judgment. I coached for 10 years and I was at 5 different places. So trust me, I'm not pointing fingers here. It's just amazing to me. So a couple of quick questions. You've been there 20 years. You started in '06. Did you go there as the head coach?
I came here as the assistant track and field and head cross country coach,
Under, was it John?
Elvis Ford.
Elvis Fork. John was before Elvis, right? John,
Right. John Coughlin retired around 2000, 2001.
okay.
And then Jeff Pig took
Oh
over for
yeah,
two
that's
years.
right. Yeah, I
Yeah.
forgot Jeff was there. That's right.
And
That's right.
then Elvis Ford took over, I think it was 2002 or 2003
Okay. All right.
is
All
when
right.
Elvis came in.
I remember John because I was coaching high school in Chicago, 97, 96, 97, right around that time frame. And he was the high jump guru. I probably watched a video that he did of high jump. And so he became the high jump guru. It was like, oh, this guy must know everything about high jump. That's just what I assumed with him. Okay. So you start out as the assistant in '06. How many years before you became the head coach?
Would have been 8 years, I believe.
So 2014, you became the head coach.
Yeah, 14, 15.
So
Yeah.
you're about 10 years. So let's, from Alabama, so we're just going to use easy math. Roughly 10 years as an assistant, roughly 10 years as the head coach is what we can say.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's go to when you became the head coach because that's always fascinating to me. And this is you're the head coach at Parkland. but that was a part-time job. I'm not dismissing it, but this is
Sure.
your first full-time head coaching job. I'm always fascinated by that. Now, you've had a lot of different experiences. Sometimes we have, yeah, I call them kids, guys and gals that are on the show, and after 2 years of coaching, they become a head coach, and I'm like, oh my God, how? Like, you've been coaching at this point for I don't know, well, 10 at Illinois State, three, probably 15, 17 years at that point when you became the head coach,
Yeah.
roughly, yeah. And you still probably where there were probably aspects where you're like, oh God, I wasn't ready for this, or I didn't know I had to do this.
Yeah.
So my favorite questions, I ask this of everybody at their first head coaching job when we get to that part of their story. The first question is, when you got the head coaching job, so when you sit down in the big boy seat, what was something that you thought was going to be hard? You're like, I might have to figure out how to do this, or I might have to get help on this, but it ended up being easy. And so, and because I'm gonna talk while you think about that here a little bit, because you can think about all the millions of different hats you wear as the head coach. Budgeting, we mentioned budgeting, equipment, recruiting, scheduling, alumni. Maybe you're involved in hiring committees now that you're a head coach for your athletic department. You're part of the hiring committee for the softball coach or whatnot.
Mhm.
I mean, there's the ability, there's 100 other things, grades, academics, anything about that. There's so many things that you have to do as the head coach. What was something that you're like, oh, I might struggle with this, or I might have to find an assistant that can really do this, and it ended up being like, oh wow, actually this wasn't as hard as I thought.
Yeah, I think coming into it for me was just learning how to manage such a large group of student athletes. I think at the time we probably had about 70 men and women or so, and managing a full coaching staff
Mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm.
just the whole thing. I think initially
Yeah,
feeling overwhelmed,
sure.
100%, like,
Mm-hmm.
wow, okay, here I am. Like, what are we gonna do? And so
Yeah.
um, so I think the management side, not only just my immediate staff, but an athletic trainer, a strength and
Mm,
conditioning,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
sports psychologist, and then, bringing in, so many other people and trying to make sure the communication really is going to be as effective as it
Yeah.
possibly can. So,
Yeah, great point. Uh, when you brought up management of like your staff, that's one of the things that I don't know if it perturbs me or just concerns me. We go to track clinics and professional development, and we're getting better today in 2025. Go back 10, 15 years, 90% of the topics would be, how to coach a cross country runner better, how to coach a long jumper better. And then there'd be some professional development. We're getting better to where it's more 80-20, 75-25, where we're talking about, resume development and things like that. But one of the things that I've yet to hear anywhere, and maybe this will be the first one, is when someone becomes a head coach, does anyone pull you to the side? And when I mean anyone, I mean like someone in HR or you're in oversight AD and says, "Hey, so you're now responsible for putting together a staff. Here are best practices on interviews, reading resumes, best practices on how to build your staff." And I don't mean like you're the track coach, you get to pick the throws and jumps, and there's like, but you know what, you probably don't want to work with your buddies, and here's why. Oh, and by the way, when you do hire these guys and gals, now here's how you evaluate them on year after year, and here's if you have to release someone, here's the proper ways to do it. I've never heard a head coach ever getting taught, advised on that. And it's always like, yeah, hey, go hire coaches. And it's like, what do you mean? That there's a lot involved with that. We hire here. I'm involved in that process. There's a lot involved in that. So when you said management of team and staff, it's like, oh yeah, dude, I could easily see you going, oh my gosh, what? Okay, I've been hired. How do I
yeah.
hire and how do I evaluate? But the question was, what was something you thought was hard that ended up actually being easier? So you learned, you kind of figured out that groove.
Over time, right.
Yeah.
Like it didn't happen overnight. And I think the previous experiences that I had at all those other positions we've been talking about, and seeing how Coach Ford did things, here at Illinois State
Hmm.
and what worked well at Illinois State
Hmm.
helped tremendously. I wouldn't have been ready to jump in as a head coach had I not been here already and seen how things can get done. But yeah, you're right. There is no playbook on how to do all of those things. And so no matter how much experience you have coming into it, as much or little, you're still figuring it out,
Yeah.
when you make mistakes along the way.
Mhm.
and you try to make as few as you possibly can, but we're all going to make them. And so it's trying to learn from them and to make better decisions each year that you have that opportunity.
So I told you I ask every first time head coach two questions. That's one, what was that you thought would be hard, would be easy? Well, the second question is the exact reverse of that. What's something that you thought would be easy? You're like, oh man, I'm gonna nail this part. And it actually was like, oh, actually, it's a little bit more complex than I thought. And you had to get help from a oversight AD or something. Again, budgeting. A lot of assistants have nothing to do with budgets. And then you sit down on day one, it's like, all right, figure out how to run a whole six teams, by the way, with this budget here. And maybe you think like, oh man, scheduling. I know exactly where this in scheduling and budgeting go very hand in hand. I know exactly where I can't believe we go to these meets. We're going to go to these meets, and then you realize, oh well, I can't even get in that meet because it's already full, and I can't even afford these plane tickets. What was something that you thought you were going to just come in and just crush it, and you're like, oh, it's a little bit harder than I thought. I need some help here.
I think it all goes hand in hand, the recruiting part, the scheduling part, the budgeting part, because you have a scholarship budget, you have a travel budget, and you have an equipment budget, and you have all these things. But how do you bring in enough student athletes to have team success,
Right.
but not stretch yourself so thin that you can't take care of the student athletes that you have in a way that they're very happy? And scheduling falls into all that too, right? So having a schedule that fits your budget, but one that's going to challenge your best athletes and also help your developmental athletes have their opportunities to grow and to get better and to have opportunities. And that's why you bring them here. And so having a balance there of taking care of everybody that you bring into the fold is really important to me. And it's always like trying to do it in a creative way that is fun and makes it interesting. And so you're not always going to have the exact same schedule every single year. You might have some specific meets, the duel with Indiana State or the Missouri Valley Conference and the NCAA, et cetera. Those are all going to be focal points, but then trying to be creative and creating different opportunities, which sometimes requires that you reach out to a different coach at a different institution to say, hey, we want to come to your meet this year. Anything you can do to help us out? Or to create a home meet where you say, hey, we're going to score this meet. We're going to bring in these three teams and everybody's going to be able to compete, everybody that they want. And, but yet we're going to do it on this weekend where there's three other home events going on with baseball and with softball. And now we're going to create this cool environment on
Oh,
campus
right.
where we're all working together. And so, it's just trying to be creative and think outside the box. And I'll be honest, like I need all my coaches and the different and the student athletes, get feedback from them and the coaches to say, hey, what can we do a little bit differently here to keep this fun and interesting and to help us uh, win the Missouri Valley and to help us get more athletes to the NCAA championships. Like give us some of that feedback and help us make this thing better.
Kind of just a question I had when you're talking about scheduling. It's a little bit of a two-parter. Like I want to ask you, I want you to answer for yourself, and then I want you to answer for the body of coaches. Um, do most programs, so therefore most coaches, stay with the same schedule year after year? And obviously, sometimes there's minor tweaks in regards to like sometimes you always go to this one meet and they decide they're not hosting this year, so you're forced to make a change.
Mhm.
So do most coaches have the same? And we know like you talked about focal meets. There's some meets that just they're always going to be in the schedule. Conference, obviously, NCAA's, obviously, maybe Drake relays, always maybe certain dual meets, things like that. But with the other ones that you could change if you wanted, do most coaches stay the same, or which would be the easy button because there's so much complexity in your job. So it'd be easier just to know, oh yeah, on the third week of February, we always go to that. I know what hotel we're going to. I know where to feed the kids. When you go to a new meet, there's all those things to figure out: what hotel, how we're going to feed the kids, transportation, etc. Do most coaches and you stay the same, or do you switch it up every year? What's kind of the thought there?
Yeah, I mean, if I was to ask 10 of my student athletes, we probably get a few different responses. I think some would say, wow, it seems like we go to a lot of the same meets. And then some others would be like, oh, you know what? Like this year we went to that meet and 2 years ago we were at. So I think the answer is somewhere in the middle
Mm,
where
mm.
we probably have a lot of similarities from year to year, but then we also have some differences. And certainly that's what we're looking for, right? To try to find something that is regional, especially when it comes to cross country and indoor. There's so many indoor bank tracks here in the Midwest. There's so many good cross country meets nearby. We don't have to go very far. But when
Right.
we get to the outdoor season in particular,
Mm.
that's when we really need to invest in travel more. And so that's when we tend to get a little bit more creative on where we go during the outdoor season.
That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah. And that speaks to the, what works for Georgia State doesn't work for Illinois State and or might not, I should say might not work for Illinois State and might not work for
Yep.
Texas State, et cetera, because of location and
Yep.
weather is what you're talking about there in that regards. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. That's just interesting. I was the type of kid that every few months I would change my room around. I like change. I'm one of those weird people that, a lot of people shirk away from change. I like change. And so I think if I were at an institution for, 20 years, I think I'd be that weird guy that would be like trying to change it all the time. And then I would run up against so many roadblocks though. Like I'd cancel one meet, tell Joe I'm not going to your meet, and I'd call Sally and she's like, "Well, I'm at cap. I can't have you in my meeting." And now I'm stuck with no meet that week, or I got to go to somewhere I don't want to go. And then I'd be so frustrated because I'd have to find new hotels and food and stuff. But I'd love it. That's what I would go to different places all the time, I swear. Okay.
Yeah.
New head coach. Who is the first person you called? All right, person. I'm a new head coach. Lay it on me. What do I need to expect? And mentor me. Who's the first person you called, or might have reached out to you?
Tom Akers.
Hmm.
Mhm.
You kind of looked at me like I should have known that. You're like, come on, man. Did you reach out to him, or did he reach out to you?
I think it was a little bit of both. I mean, he knew that I was looking at the opportunity, and so it was a daily conversation for a while there. And so, he'd reach out to me and just check in at times, and there were
Gotcha.
some others as well, but Tom was definitely a big part of that, and still is to this day.
That's a pretty good one. I like that. What was the first thing you did? I, I put us on the schedule for a different meet, Mike, or I analyzed all of our scholarship. What was kind of the first, like, okay, I'm head coach Bovee now. I have a lot more authority at that point. What do you remember? Like, what's the first thing? Like, all right, I know I need to. I want to put my fingerprint on this part of the program first.
Well, we really wanted to emphasize our success at the conference level and establish a well-balanced team. And we had some incredible athletes, for sure, for quite a while I was an assistant coach and Coach Ford was a head coach. Some of them working for you right now. Mr. Tim Glover was
Yeah,
one of them for
yeah.
sure. And
He was pretty good. Pretty good.
yeah, yeah, Brittany Smith and Aisha
Yeah.
Trott and many others. But yeah, I think for us, it was about building a little bit more depth in all the different event areas to really give us an opportunity to try to compete for a Missouri Valley Conference championship and yet still have that same success at the national level. So those were our initial goals when I took over as a head coach.
What, Jeff, you've been there 20 years and you've had kind of two parts of success. And what I mean by that is you've had kids that are part of your program. You mentioned Tim. So you didn't, well, as far as I know, you didn't coach javelin. So you didn't coach him, but it's part of the program. I truly believe that it takes the whole village, not just that, not just that event coach and that athlete. It takes everybody. And you have had people directly under your, they were your event group that have gone on big time success. You've had national champions, you've had Olympians, you've had I mean, just very, very successful program that you've been involved in and have led now for close to 10 years. What keeps you there? You're not afraid to, I almost said hop around, which would have been completely unfair because you've been at a place for 20 years, but you're not afraid to move, at least maybe, earlier stage in your life and career, your age and stage there. You've been very successful. I have to imagine other places have talked to you, but you remain steadfast as a Redbird and you remain from the outside looking in here, steadfast at I want to have a winning program. You have certainly not pushed cruise control, my friend. You continue to push that accelerator to get good athletes, good assistants. I'm thinking
Yeah.
about Deshaun now, who is tearing it up, coaching and sprints and things like that. He's doing an amazing job. Your whole staff. I'm just singling him out. So you certainly have not hit cruise control. You consider still accelerating forward and having a great program. What's kept you there at Bloomington at Illinois State?
Well, I love the university and the people I work with here and the community as a whole. Bloomington Normal is a great place, and
Sure. Yeah.
I have three sons, and they're here. That's a big pull for me, and I think to me, having coached at these different levels, I just love coaching the sport of track and field, and so I'm not chasing, I don't know, something that I think might be better somewhere else,
Right.
and I've had some, opportunities maybe to look at some other possibilities, but at the end of the day, like I'm really happy here and I want to continue to see what we can do to take this to the next level. And I have a great staff. You mentioned Deshaun Jordan, Mike Turk, Jake Jacoby, Jake Gillum,
Oh my God,
Steve
that's
Luke.
right.
We've got a great group and we really love working together and they constantly pushing the buttons on trying to take us to the next level and find what recruit's going to help us get there, what do we need to do to develop this athlete, and how do we support them in ways that they can get a great education here. And so the things that the university and the department value is a big part of our team values, and so that's what keeps me here, honestly, is just all those things put together. I get to do what I love to do, and Illinois State's giving me the opportunity to do that.
I told you I'm a visual guy. I keep hearing the theme of, leveling up, leveling up. So I think of like this mountain. I don't know that you have a mountain that has a peak. Like you just continue. It's like, oh man, that was a really good year. That's awesome. All right, how do we get better? Move up a step. Oh man, this is really good. Wow, we had more All Americans or more qualifiers than ever. That's really cool. All right, how do we step up and do more? Like you're always kind of stepping up that proverbial mountain that doesn't have a mountaintop. You just continue to
Hmm.
climb forward, and to do that, to keep using that mountain climbing analogy, as if I had any experience doing that. By the way, it does take a complete staff. It does not a staff, a complete team, and obviously athletes there. But I'm talking about. You mentioned Jacoby and Turk and those guys, Luke. That's part of it. Your athletic trainers, your administration, those are all part of that team that has to move forward to make that step by step. There cannot be any weak links there. They all have to be pulling on the same chain,
Yeah,
and that seems to be your motto, your mission, your passion to continue to
right.
level up.
Yeah. And we're all humans, right? We all have, a day where maybe we're a little bit less motivated than the day before, but then you get that other coach in your staff that's like, hey, you need to get your
That's
shit together. Let's
exactly
go.
right. That is
Like we
so
hold each
right.
other accountable and that, but again, like that doesn't happen that often, but yet you need to have that. Like, we didn't win this year, so what do we got to do differently to win? Like where are we missing it? What are we, let's think outside the box here and let's get in the room and let's have an honest conversation about the state of the union, right? And
Yep.
like how do we get better? And so you got to be asking yourself that all the time. And that's what's great about the staff is that they keep me on my toes that way. And hopefully I do a little bit of that for them too.
Teammates are invaluable. They really are. I think of this. I can't remember where it was from, but the saying it's if you want to go fast, go by yourself. If you want to go far, go with others. And when you think about if you going far means winning championships, going fast is maybe winning one time, one thing.
Right.
Going far, you pick the people around you tremendously. All right, Mr. Bovee, last question here, and I'll let you go. Appreciate your time here today. As you look forward to the future, and you get to define if that's the 26th season, the 36th season, I don't know, the next 5, 10 years, what's got you excited about Illinois State track and field?
Well, obviously we're in this new world with roster caps, and we're able to keep them at the full complement of 45 and up to 17 on the cross country side. And so, we're gonna, actually, it's gonna be a little bit smaller of a roster than what we've had, but we're really embracing that and looking forward to just taking this program to the next level. And for us, that's continue to recruit a high level student athlete. And so for us, we're going to continue to try to recruit the home, state, start with the state of Illinois.
Yep.
But we also have gotten a bigger presence on the international recruiting scene. We have quite a few internationals on our team. At this moment in time, we'll continue to do that. Obviously, look at the transfer portal as well. So it's going to be a nice balance, and we're going to be learning how to navigate all of the changes and whatnot. But the other big part of what we need to be doing here, and really any mid-major, is we can't just be recruiting the people to come into our program. We have to be doing the things that keep our athletes here. And
Mm.
so that is the part that we're working on the most, is working with NIL and working with all the different resources we have on campus, to take care of our student athletes in a way that they want to stay here because they love being a Redbird. And so that's the key to our success, is not only bringing in wonderful people that are good students and good athletes, but are going to keep them happy, and they're going to want to thrive here and to finish out their eligibility here at Illinois State.
Yeah, great point there. And when I hear those things, and those are all, we should be doing those before NIL timeframe and all those and we were. But I hear those things and I'm like, I'm okay that I got out because now I get to do those kind of very same issues, but with you, with coaches. And part of that is being here on the podcast and uplifting and honoring what you do. And Jeff, first of all, thank you. I asked for a lot of time. This is not an easy podcast to be on, guys and gals. I don't ask you for 30 minutes. I ask you for 2 hours, and we're getting close to that mark. And so I'm just so grateful for you, Jeff. I'm glad we were able to do this post-track season for you a little bit here, so there's a little bit more time for you. But the most valuable thing that you can give me is your time, and I'm really grateful that you joined us today here.
Well, likewise, Mike. This has been fun, and something that I haven't been able to do, and just truly enjoyed it, and appreciate your time as well.
Absolutely, man. Jeff, thank you so much for your journey. Thank you, guys and gals, for being here, listening to him. I mean, that was so cool. Jeff is one of those guys I talk about. Sometimes I have guests on here that I've known forever. They're like brothers to me or sisters to me. Kind of on the other side of that spectrum, I've never met them before. This is the first time ever. Jeff is kind of in the middle, but boy, I learned so much about this story, and I love, and I want to explore this more with coaches. I love the variety of coaching, right? High school, junior college, Division III, Division I, GA, and assistant head coach. I mean, there's a lot of different roles there, and that is what I think is super important for people who listen to the podcast to hear and see, because we have a lot of people who listen. This is their first year coaching ever, and you think you're on the path of that you're always going to be at the school, or you're always going to be Division I, or always going to be high school, and there's a lot of paths out there and a lot of avenues to get there. And I think hearing experiences like Jeff's are extremely important. So thank you again so much for being here and listening. Join us next week. We'll do it all over again. Thanks, guys.